Hey everyone, I'm Eric here with Onramp. Thanks for watching Create Something with Onramp. We're going to talk about supply chain today, how the supply chain impacts your e-commerce business. We'll look at this from both a U.S. supply chain and international supply chain perspective and talk about the different dynamics that go on there. First thing to think about in supply chain is you need to understand really two pieces, timing and cost. So what is your end-to-end supply chain time from the purchase of raw materials to a supplier to production of what your finished product is, to the ability to get that finished product out of the supplier's hands and into some sort of freight or shipping solution, and then throughout that delivery chain to your warehouse or your 3PLs, where then that inbound freight's going to be received, and the time it then takes that warehouse to then break that apart, depalletize it, and get each individual unit of your inventory in a position where it can be picked off of a shelf, put into a box, and shipped to your retail buyer. And then how do you think about managing that inventory that's available for retail purchase and ensuring then that you understand, again, working back through that supply chain timeline, when you need to be purchasing your next batch of inventory so that you never run out of inventory. The worst thing that can happen as an e-commerce merchant is you actually run out of inventory, and then you're going to be losing orders to competitors because you're not able to fulfill on that. U.S. supply chains, especially in the COVID era are far more resilient right now than global supply chains, given a lot of the shipping constraints that we're seeing in ports around the U.S. You really can focus then on making sure that you've got multiple suppliers for your products. There is an advantage to single sourcing. You can probably get better discounts, especially when you're an emerging business, say sub 5 or 10 million in revenue. It's hard to go find lots of different vendors who want to work with you because you won't have a single purchase size that's big enough to get to the discounts that you want. However, having multiple vendors means that when something goes wrong with one, you do have the fallback of finding another or working with one of your other partners to ensure that you still have inventory coming through your supply chain into your warehouses ready to ship to your customers as they're making those purchase decisions. You may sacrifice some discounts, and you're going to have to weigh what that discount is to your business versus the risk associated with that. And really, it's an economic decision, and there's a math equation in terms of just how much is the revenue worth versus how much is the discount worth on a single supply versus multi-supplier solution there. The next piece of this in timing is just how do you track what's happening through that supply chain? So when are your finished goods being produced? How long is it going to take to produce those? Do you have service level agreements with your suppliers or supplier that they have to hit so that you can accurately predict what it's going to take to have that ready, and then accurately predict when you're going to make that final payment to release the finished goods inventory, what it's going to take that freight provider to actually pick that inventory up, move it across the U.S. or from wherever that supplier is to wherever your warehouses are, and then what does your warehouse need in terms of time to unpack that inventory, right? These things come in pallets or containers. You have to open those things up. You have to get that inventory out. You have to make sure it's sorted correctly. You have to make sure that what was promised by the supplier has actually been delivered. People are working really fast, so errors and mistakes are made, certainly unintentional, usually non-malicious, but still have to be tracked for. And then how long does it take to get that inventory on the shelves in your warehouse ready for your pick, pack, and ship efforts in terms of converting those digital e-commerce orders into those physical steps that will then get that product from your warehouse to your retail buyer, creating a happy experience and ensuring that you're not getting returns or chargebacks or things like that from uncompleted orders. Understanding the timing of that is critical, and then visibility there so that you're tracking on that. So if you've placed that order with your supplier, are they giving you are they providing updates in terms of here's where they are in their process? Are they going to be delivering on time? Are they going to be ahead of schedule, behind schedule? And what does that mean for your business? Then in terms of the freight supplier, or your freight provider is picking up those products, when are they going to pick up? What is the freight timeline? Can you track that freight shipment? You should be able to, in this modern era, know where your freight is in any period of time, or at least know it's left one warehouse and what the expected ETA is to the next warehouse, and be alerted if that's changing because of conditions, right? Like we saw a couple years ago here in Texas, the snowpocalypse certainly slowed things down for 5 days in terms of freight moving across the state. Early in my career, I learned it doesn't matter if you're going to be late or early. If you're not going to be on time, really, really important that you let your team know so that they can adapt to that. Same thing's true in your supply chain. If it's going to be early, you need to know that so that your team's ready to receive that freight as it comes in. If it's going to be late, you need to know that because maybe there's some ways to move a partial freight shipment using UPS overnight to get it to your warehouse so you have just enough inventory to keep up with orders while the rest of that slower freight is coming along and getting to your warehouse and ready to ship as well. Finally then, you have to manage the cost of all of this, right? Those cost inputs, specifically with inventory. Inventory is typically the number one cost on your cost of goods sold as you think about running a business and the margin there and moving inventory from your supplier or suppliers to your warehouse is a big part of that cost as well. So really effectively managing that's a critical part of running any e-commerce business and ensuring that you're going to generate margins necessary on a per order basis to cover that bulk shipment and that bulk inventory purchase. As we think about then the international supply chain, many of our merchants at Onramp work with Chinese suppliers. There's probably a great episode here just in thinking about how do you diversify a supply chain across multiple geographies instead of one. Today, let's just worry about what it means when you're shipping overseas. You're going to buy that freight. You're going to have that then with a freight forwarder usually put onto a container ship and shipped across an ocean into a port someplace in the U.S. For our Chinese supply chain, that generally means the Port of Los Angeles or the Port of Long Beach. We've seen in COVID, those ports are incredibly backed up. So your timing now is not just what's the time to cross an ocean, it's what's the time spent bobbing around in a harbor waiting for that ship to be allowed into the port to be unloaded. Some of the advice we're providing our merchants in this day and age is instead of going through Long Beach and LA, start routing to the ports in Florida, the ports in Texas. States are open for business. Those ports are moving efficiently. You add a few days in transit time, maybe 5 days in transit time, coming through the Panama Canal to those ports, but you're going to eliminate 60 to 90 to 120 days of just waiting in a harbor before you can get into the port of Long Beach. One of the critical pieces about that is when you're talking to your freight forwarder about routing to those, make sure they know what they're doing and actually validate that they're not using container ships that are too large to get through the Panama Canal. We have seen freight forwarders make that commitment, and then our customer finds out later on that it's still in the Port of Long Beach because guess what? It was on a boat that wouldn't fit through the canal, and of course it couldn't get to Texas. So having that knowledge ahead of time allows you to really hold your freight forwarder accountable and means then that things are going to get where they belong in a timely fashion that you can track, and you can reduce the risk then of those other types of delays. All the same rules in terms of cost, timing, tracking apply. Freight forwarders will give you tracking data on what the container ships are doing. When it hits the port, you will be able to get information on how long it's going to take that to clear the port, and then as it clears the port, what the freight time is going to be from that port all the way to your warehouse, again, for unpacking and getting it ready for shipping to the end customer. Some other important things here, make sure you get your customs data up to date. You want to clear customs as quickly as possible. Customs forms are not difficult to find and work with. Most of the shipping solutions, guys like Shipping Easy, ShipStation, Indicia, the Stamps family of companies will have great inbound international solutions and outbound international solutions for that. Your freight forwarder should be managing that as well. The last thing, though, you want to find is that data is not correct, and then customs are holding up your inbound shipments as well. As you move from that port, again, tracking your freight provider all the way to the end is the right thing to do, and then just being ready at your warehouse to receive it is critical. So this has been how to really optimize your supply chain and think about managing that from a domestic and international perspective. Appreciate you spending time with Onramp today. Please subscribe if you like this content, and we'll have more Create Something with Onramp episodes for you here soon. Thank you.